All right, welcome back. Hey, I am beyond ecstatic for today's episode. I kind of took a shot in the dark and did a cold email over to Brad Buck, the superintendent over at Waukee School District, just outside of Des Moines, hoping he'd take me up on the offer of being part of the podcast. And sure enough, he responded and said he'd be happy to take part in an interview. So I am, not only am I a little nervous, I'm also excited to welcome Dr. Brad Buck to the show here. And before I let him say a few words, I want to just quickly talk about just where Dr. Buck has been. He's currently the superintendent of the Waukee School District. Before that, he was the superintendent of schools for Cedar Rapids Community School District. And before that, he was the director of the Iowa Department of Education. And then before that, many other things. But again, a spectacular resume here, and I'm really excited for him to share his story. So with all that being said, Dr. Buck, hey, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, Jared, and thank you for that kind and generous introduction. When you sent the email, I thought this sounds like fun, and then when I read through the questions, I thought, well, hopefully I have something to offer here, and we'll kind of see how this goes. So, yeah, I'm in Waukee schools right now. I was actually in Waukee schools for 10 years before those places you mentioned, and absolutely love it. And so when this opportunity came open, excited to be back. So for those that may not be familiar with Waukee, we're seventh largest district in the state. We do pretty well in lots of things, activities, athletics, academics. We continue to be either the fastest or one of the fastest growing districts in the state. And I think the pride point that we have in that growth, so that's what people often know us for. But I think the pride point we have is connectedness to our kids. So we want every kid to know, whether we were an 1,800 kid district, an 11,000 kid district, that we still know you as an individual student, and we're worried about you both academically and as a person. So I think we've stayed focused on that, and it's exciting to be back in Waukee.
So when you said, there's something that caught my ear there, you said seventh largest district in the state. I just remember, and this came up in one of the earlier episodes, I think it was Scott Bloom, who either used to work at Waukee or graduated from Waukee like around 2000, and how it used to be so small. How big, think back, you said you're at Waukee for 10 years. Yeah. Right when you started at Waukee, how big was the district and how much has it grown since then?
Yeah, so here's the context point I love to tell people. So 18 years ago, when I started in Waukee as middle school principal, and we had one middle school at that time, we had 2,850 kids as a district. 18 years later, we have 11,500.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're fall of 21, we're opening our second high school. Fall of 22, our 10th elementary. Fall of 23, our third, 6, 7 middle school. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting and interesting place. So.
Gosh, that's just unbelievable growth. I could probably sit here and talk to you for an hour about just what that means, what leading a district looks like. But I'm going to go to the first question here. We're going to simplify things up a little bit and kind of get started here with the first question, which is, what is the best $50 purchase you have made in the last 6 months?
Yeah, so I've in thinking about that a little bit, I would actually say it is a carry out dinner that we had with our daughter, and in this whole COVID situation and just the way it's dynamically changed our life, we had an opportunity to be around her and her husband and just spend some time together. And we were, careful about social distance and all the good stuff, but it was just a joy to kind of be around somebody and just relax and celebrate her and her birthday. So it was just really nice.
So tell me, how many kids do you have?
So I have 6 kids.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So my oldest, she just turned 24. She married her high school sweetheart. So she's a Waukee grad. So this is where the previous thing. So she's a Waukee grad, married her high school sweetheart. His family owns a Century Farm out west of town. They bought a little house here in Waukee and live here. And then I have a son that goes to Kirkwood, a daughter that goes to Iowa State. They're all Waukee grads. Then I have a son that's a special needs guy. He graduated from Kennedy High School, and he still goes to the Transition Center in Cedar Rapids. And then I have a sophomore and an 8th grader. So
of all the, which you talked about the dinner, who is that with? Which of the
that was with the oldest daughter. Yeah, that was oldest daughter and her husband.
Gotcha. And I'm just curious, as I think people want to know, what did you guys get? Where did you guys go?
Oh, we ate gastro. I think it started out as a food truck in Waukee, but they've actually got a food truck and a brick and mortar. And so they have amazing food. I had short rib, grilled cheese, and some truffle fries. So
wow.
Yeah. And it is a little bit of a fudge on the $50. If you go to gastro with the size group we had, it wasn't exactly $50.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Just
your meal, you know, yeah.
My part of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds okay. I'm going to write that down just because I'm always, this show is about it's not just about education. It's about getting some little life tricks and tips. And, my wife and I are down in Des Moines quite a bit, and we always just defer, let's just go Olive Garden. Let's just go.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the usuals, So I'm going to write that down then as a possible.
Maybe we should do, Jared, maybe we should do a short podcast in the future on some Des Moines area hangouts for people. Oh yeah.
There's so many places. No, okay. Before the one place that for SAI, there's always, for those of us who don't live in the metro, there's always where are we going to go for dinner? Where are we going to go for dinner? And when I was at Muscatine, the biggest place they used to love going was Latin King.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Is that pretty well known down there too?
Oh yeah. You got to get the chicken spadini or whatever it is. That's just, and you got to get the olive oil version or steak de Burgo. Oh yeah.
Here you go, guys. Hey, audience, you came for an education podcast. You're getting the best of in Des Moines for food. So very cool. Hey, okay, we're gonna shift gears here a little bit. What is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
Yeah, so this has got a little bit of dust on it, but the center of it still remains true, and that is that's Good to Great. So one of the things I often find myself, and I've there's lots of other great books in the interim, and they have value. I was thinking of Schmoker's Results Now and a variety of other things, but when I think of that book, especially, I think about leadership is just a lot about navigating improvement with people, and it can be change, but hopefully improvement. And when I think of that book, and one of the things that stands out the most is, well, first of all, good is the enemy of great. So when you think to yourself, man, we're doing a pretty good job here, it's easy to kind of fall back on that. So what could we do to be even better? And how can we be bold? So the idea of big, hairy, audacious goals is what I oftentimes say to the team is, are we being as bold as we can be? And will we be disappointed in ourselves if we look back 2 or 3 years from now and say, we could have been even more bold? So that concept and thread has carried through for me. And then one of the other ones that's an important one is, when you're mucking around in this leadership and improvement work, it takes a lot of alignment of a lot of things to get stuff moving. So you can pick low-hanging fruit and get some early wins, and that's all good. But the reality is, one of the concepts in there is the flywheel effect. And so the flywheel effect to me is, and I oftentimes will say this to the team, we have our hands on the flywheel and it's moving. We can feel it moving, but wait until that baby starts spinning, because we're getting stuff lined up here that all of a sudden this thing's going to be spinning so fast, we're going to step away from it because the improvement is just going to tumble forward and just accelerate in on top of itself. So those concepts to me, I recognize they're not the newest concepts, but from a day-to-day, just living in leadership perspective, they still resonate. And then I would say the other thing is just level 5 leadership, just that leader that's not concerned about her or himself, but is totally dedicated to thinking about my responsibility to students, my responsibility to the people I serve, my community. Just those concepts still just resonate loudly with me.
So, man, you took the words right out of my mouth, first of all, because I love Good to Great. And we use the flywheel concept here at South Tama. It makes so much sense. If you're doing these, and we identified our 5 strategic anchors, and if we're doing these 5 things well all the time, and we know we're not where we need to be, but if we set those in place and just, like you said, step back and get the momentum going. So you just made my day, by the way, that
Hey, all right.
if Dr. Buck is saying we're doing the flywheel here, and he's a big advocate, then I feel like we're on the right track too. But
I love it. I love it.
and you know what? If Jim Collins is like, if you ever, he's got some amazing. On my walks, I've been listening to some of his podcasts, and he's got some great interviews out there where he just hammers home the idea of the flywheel. And level 5 leadership and all the things you talked about. That it's just, he has one of the best minds, and people think it's just a business book, but that's not the case.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. These are totally consumable leadership concepts.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, I am so glad you brought up that book. I will link that I would recommend anybody who's listening to check out that book. I will link it in the notes there.
And then they do have that companion piece that he wrote for the public sector, and that's helpful too. So yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring that up because sometimes on previous podcasts, I brought up like other works by that person and they're like not familiar and I feel bad.
Oh, okay.
Social sectors is awesome. I mean, I just, and actually I was going to purchase it, but there's like a PDF. I feel bad sharing this, but there's a PDF version. It's only like a 30-page book, 40 pages.
Yeah. It's a little paperback that kind of says, by the way, this works for you too.
Oh, it's so good. So like you've definitely made my day, my weekend.
All right. Hey.
That we're speaking the same language here. That, and like you said, it is a little bit older research, but it's still so true. So that's awesome. So I'm going to move on here before I just keep asking all these questions about Jim Collins. What is the best culture hack? And I listed off the places you've been. It's just, I'm just real curious what you're going to say. What is the best culture hack you have either seen or used in the school setting?
Yeah, so these are, I get a little bit, I kind of smile because I'm getting a little longer in the tooth now. So, so one of them is the relationships, right? So when I was a principal at 28 years old, I really believe that, and I'm going to give you a specific example of this just a second. So 28 years old, and I believe with the right leader and the right programs, you can sort of insert people and people can come and go, but you'll get a great system. And then I, fairly quickly came to the realization that doesn't work at all. And well, I shouldn't say at all. It'll get you some level of improvement, but not optimized perfect. So then and I like people anyway. So I started to more heavily focus on people because the relationships are at the heart of the matter. And that got us improvement. But then the alignment between authentic, meaningful relationships and a high quality aligned system is, of course, the coin of the realm. So, so what I would say is this, and this goes back a little, is just along the tooth part. If you're familiar with the work that talks about first and second order change, one of the things that I think about that's the hack in that is one, recognizing that in the exact same circumstance, in the exact same conditions, some people are experiencing it as first order change. That is, it's the next natural step. It makes complete sense to them. This is what we would do next. And others are going, holy cow, this is disruptive. This is frightening. This is kind of all those words. I'll need a new skill set in order to accomplish it all. So the hack is knowing your people at a level, just like kids in a classroom, knowing them and understanding likely how they're going to experience it. And then beyond that, we know in second order change, input, order, culture, and communication are going to be impacted. So you're going to hear phrases like, I used to have a voice here. I don't know what's going on here. I feel disrupted. I feel like things are out of order. So if you know that, so it's not, is it going to happen? But when it happens, what I've seen people do in the hack is, when they devise plans around improvement efforts, they put those into the plan so that they're very intentional about communication pathways, very intentional about staff to have opportunities to provide input on how the change is going, right on down the list. So the hack to me is, if you know these things about people and you know how your people are going to likely experience it, then set up pathways intentionally to support them through second order change. So that to me is the hack that over, I don't know, many contexts, many it's just been helpful, and it honors people.
So as a relatively new superintendent, like this is a battle. This is a challenge for me. And I think you mentioned maybe, do you have an example you're able to draw from where you built in those opportunities for feedback and were able to make adjustments along the way?
Yeah, so I'll give a principal experience because it may
Sure.
be helpful if we have some
Sure.
principals listening too. So
Absolutely.
when I was in Waukee before, we were going from a 6-8 middle school to a 6-7 middle school and an 8-9 middle school. So our 9th grade teachers were going to be pulled out of the high school, and so we worked through that process. So when we started to put our groups together about, what is 8-9 going to look like? What is, I mean, even down to, are we going to let the kids have parking permits as freshmen? Are we going to let freshmen play on the varsity team? I mean, all those details. So we had activity athletics group, et cetera. We also had in our planning documents an actual line that said communication, and then we had a group focused on communication. We had a group focused, communication input were together because that makes some sense, right?
Yeah.
And then we also had a group on culture. So how are we attending to the culture, and especially as it relates to things like I used to feel valued here, and then that's in tandem with I used to have a voice here, those sorts of things. So we actually set up intentional committee structure around second order change and had that document available to people. And honestly, when you speak to people about it, so this is like trust people, because if you trust people, they're smart. When you literally say to them in faculty meeting, hey guys, here's how some of you are going to experience this, and it's okay. And so when you're in the staff lounge and you used to hear people, or you're saying things like, oh, I feel out of control, I feel like my world is just, shaken up, pause a minute and smile and think to yourself, we knew this was going to happen, and here's how we're going to respond to it. Here's a group of people that's intentionally attending to these things. So it was one of those times and it wasn't perfect. So please know, we all, the truth is in the margins, right? But anyway, but communicating that to people ahead of time, that this is how they are likely to feel. And also the people that don't feel it as a disruption, like the people that are like, man, I'm ready to go. This makes complete sense. I can't wait to be at the 8-9. They're also thinking to themselves like, oh, this is why my colleague is feeling and behaving this way, and this is why I feel and behave this way, because they're experiencing the same thing very differently from me. And giving it names and context and a framework is just so comforting, I think, to people as you navigate improvement. So
Sure. Gosh, that was so well said. I just think that experience you had, I mean, you're in a growing district. You're constantly having to navigate people moving buildings, new boundaries, in terms of where students go to school at. I have to imagine some of what you went through during that transition has served you well, returning as maybe be able to share those principles with your building leaders now, having been in their shoes. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And we still use a lot of those same conceptual ideas. So like when I came in as superintendent, I did entrance interviews with the 50 leaders and directors, and then all the people in district office, my board members. So we tried to set up some internal communication patterns, and one, just relationship building, because it's fun to meet people or reconnect with people, but to also understand what they're listening to. We did it with our Teachers Association, our WEA. One of the things that was cool is WEA had sent the board a set of cards that said, this is what I need from my next superintendent. And it was a stack of, I don't know, a couple hundred cards at least. And so I had the secretary type that into a Wordle type thing. And so words came up like transparency, passion, communication, et cetera. So I put that document outside my office. And when I met with the WEA, I talked to them about, I love these words. These words are meaningful to me. And so even on the opening day event we do an opening day event like lots of places. Ours is at Hope. So we get, 1,700 people together. And that was part of my opening day comments is this is what I'm hearing from entrance interviews. This is what I'm hearing from school, some teachers, and just invited accountability. So I said, these words mean something to me. And so if you ever find me being not transparent or misaligned, or you know what you can do, you can call me out gently, right? Lovingly, but it's okay to call me out, because I don't want to be living outside of the lines of what we agree is important to us here. So.
That's great. That's great. Just real interesting here, listening how you describe that. What I'm going to go on to the next question here. What is one professional practice you utilize that you would recommend to others?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's a professional practice, but this has been one of the things that's been most helpful to me over my career. Being very thoughtful and intentional about how you frame whatever is coming up next. Because the first framing is the most important framing for people who are going to experience something. And so when you think about going into an improvement effort, what are we really trying to accomplish? And what is the why? Because if people understand the why, most people are rational. If they really understand the why, and you can frame in the why, how it makes sense to them, and why they would be connected to it and why it would make sense to them. And then some additional framing about how we're thinking about going forward. But I always try to leave a lot of room in the how, because I personally am less concerned about the how. So we've all done these things before where there's loose tight structures or autonomy, authority structure, however you want to think about it. But the best organizations, best schools, best classrooms say, here's the rules we're going to live by. These are immutable, but there's all this room around about how we can make it happen and make sense for you. So when I think about framing, get to the sort of here's what we have to get to, and then how are we going to do that? That's all the opportunity for people to be creative, to find themselves in the narrative, to optimize their strengths within that. I mean, that's, to me, the hack to me is, so if you frame it in a way that doesn't resonate people to begin with, it takes a lot more work to get back to what you're trying to accomplish than if you're thoughtful about framing it in the beginning. So my team, they tease me because they're like, I say this in meetings all the time. How are we going to be deliberate about framing this so people really understand what we're trying to do and how they can hear themselves in it? Like now they'll say to me, I'll start the sentence and they'll just say, oh, I know. Wait a second. You're going to say to us, let's be thoughtful about how we're going to frame this.
Sure. So
I only know like 6 things, Jared. So that's one of them.
Well, these are you got to have that. I mean, those are the principles that you fall back upon when you're looking at change. And I promised you before the show, I said I wouldn't dig deep into initiatives, but I guess I want to ask, like, there at Waukee, is there something where you can describe how you've used this process, where you're focusing on the why versus the how?
Yeah,
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot there, and if not, we can certainly come back to it. But I just
yeah. So I would give you. We're actually in the midst of a strategic planning process. And so we have worked hard to explain why that's important. So it gives you those, like you described earlier, those anchor points, or organizationally, that when we're going to put energy, time, resource in whatever form into that alignment. And so in that, we put together a task force that it's got parents on it, it's got certified staff, classified staff, et cetera. And we really did start with a blank slate, other than to say, we need a refreshed mission, we need a refreshed vision, and we need some guideposts here. So what has emerged out of that? And we've pulled in additional focus groups. So the how part of it is, we've pulled in lots of eyes in different spots and tried to get cold looks at it and say, does this really make sense? So where we are in that process now is we've got a revised vision and mission statement that I'm super excited about. We've got 5 top line goals. We've got some input metrics that are getting put together. And now people will be responsible to go out and do the next phase of that, because essentially it's designed around our senior leadership team. So they'll have significant roles in each of those goal areas, and then they'll go out and lead and do similar things. So, but we didn't start with a preconceived notion in the framing, other than these things need updated. And we haven't had a strategic plan that's been specific like this. So part of our next work also will be, once you have a strategic plan, it's continually basting people in the plan. So my best hope a year from now is all staff could at least say what the top 5 what are the top 5 things working on but being responsible fiscally, staying ahead of the buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of a 30,000 foot experience of that, kind of in tandem with a school experience of it.
And for additional context, I'm making sure I got the date right. Just last summer, you were named the superintendent at Waukee, correct?
Right. And we also put together a 10-year facility plan, and we're putting a $195 million bond referendum in front of our public, hopefully in September. So there's a lot of movement. And then by the way, COVID came, and we're going from a not 1-to-1 to a 1-to-1 district by the start of school next year. So
wow.
It's just, sure. I'm blessed to work with a lot of great people. I always joke, but it's not really a joke. It takes a lot of people to get me through a day, Jared.
Well, I'm always curious, like what leaders would say in terms of, like, you talked about rewriting that strategic plan, rewriting the, whatever you want to call it, core values, vision, mission, is that something that it sounds like towards the end of year 1, is that pretty much kind of your timeline, how you do those things? Or because I think every leader needs to establish that at some point. And the question that always comes up is, what's the timeline on that? What was your approach? Am I correct in thinking you took the first 8-9 months to kind of get the baseline understanding of the district? And
so that was it. We did the baseline. We engaged people. We actually went out and did an RFP on a consultant for this one to have a partner in that work with us. We did it on our own in Cedar Rapids, and I thought we did a really, there was a little more mass there because it's a 16,000. So there's a different level of mass of access to people. So like the district office there, because older, more mature district is more robust in terms of number of people, et cetera. So this in Waukee, we went out and we found a great partner, and they've been working us through the process. But yeah, Jared, honestly, my life experience has been, I like to come into a place and I want to collect as much data as we can, because I want to know our context. And at some point as a leader, you're responsible for that. So the first year you don't say this out loud, like, well, let's blame the last person, because that's not good practice or helpful. But people recognize you don't own the current context, right? But at some point you're going to own that context. So knowing what the lay of the land was that first year, as it becomes more and more your own and that of your team and board, you can point to the actual improvement efforts that have been made since you got here. And that to me has been very helpful. And I've really focused on that. Even since Sadell, that's been a priority. So, yeah.
Who did you guys use as a consultant? If somebody wanted to pair with the consulting group,
shoot.
No, don't worry about it.
Jason's, I can't remember what they're.
It's no problem. Because I think
they're going to kill me because they do a great job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just know districts are like, oh, we should get somebody to help us with this work, and then, okay, who do we contact?
I wish I could tell you their
Don't
name.
worry about it. You could always email me after, and I can put
I'll do that.
Do that.
Yeah, because they're very skilled.
Okay, that's good, because those of us in smaller districts like myself, we kind of just, and those of us who are new kind of just, okay, well, I know I need to gather information, and you have your focus groups and you do your community surveys, but you're never quite sure if you're doing it. Is this the right way of doing it or not? And so having some experts come in and assist with that would be helpful, definitely.
One other thing that's helpful is then they're leading things and able to ask difficult questions. And it's not somebody saying, well, I wonder if that's really what Brad's hoping for, or Jared's hoping for, or whatever. It's they're asking the question and I'm in the group just like everybody else. And
such a good point.
Yeah. Very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move more into some habits and practices here, routines. In the last 5 years, what new habit has most improved your life?
So this would be a funny one to me. So we did Covey's 7 Habits when I was a middle school principal in Hudson, 20 years ago.
Oh gosh, you were at Hudson?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, that's nice. That was, of all my jobs, that job was maybe the right balance of lifestyle, pay.
Sure,
Yeah, that
sure.
was, and my wife would always tease me because I'd say, I'm going to the grocery store. They're in town. I'll be right back. Get milk or whatever. She's like, you're not going to give me back, because I knew every kid. Like,
Sure. Oh yeah.
it's
Oh
just a different thing, right? So,
yeah.
uh, so this concept of important versus urgent. So the tyranny of the urgent. There's stuff on us all the time. Like, we could fill our entire lives with urgent things that are just in the inbox, blah blah blah. But he does that quadrant where it's like, let's focus on what is the level of urgency here relative to the level of importance, because there's a lot of things that fill your inbox that they matter. So it's not that they don't matter, but they don't matter relative to things that are going to make a larger difference later on. So if you're willing to commit your 5, 10 minutes, hour to this right now, what didn't you spend an hour on that might have a larger, bigger bang at the end? So like, I heard that made sense. I use that in PowerPoints with staff. I'm like, oh yeah, because we're all doing it together. You've lived these types of things.
Yeah.
So, but then I kind of put it like it dissipated like things do in life. And then, I don't know, it was a few years ago, and we just had a lot going on. I think it's when I was a C driver, we just had a lot going on. We were starting the implementation of our strategic plan, and those urban districts, there's a lot going on all the time.
Wow.
Anyway, I came across that again, and I thought to myself, this is it. The tyranny of the urgent. We are spending so much time in the urgent that at times we're losing. So we actually reconstructed our cabinet meetings differently. We recrafted the agenda. And one of the things we did, because anytime we got together, like, we met weekly for like 3 hours, and that whole meeting, it could easily be urgent, and it could have been a 10-hour meeting of urgent. I mean, it's just, and that's even scaled to any size district. There's stuff popping all the time. So we actually deliberately reconstructed the agenda framed around that concept, so that we deliberately spent time in every meeting together, going back to things that mattered most. So one of the things that was most helpful is we got a guy from DC schools who joined our cabinet, who was really data focused and really focused on like outcome boards and numbers, that we would periodically, he was used to either quarterly or mid-year at cabinet presenting updates on his team's goals and metrics on those. And we had kind of lost sight of all that in the urgency. So we actually redesigned that agenda so that we had at least, I don't know if it was every other week or once a month, but we started to do reports from around the room on the goals of the subsets of the people in that. And so hopefully that's a helpful specific example where we took that concept, but so yeah, okay, great. But how do you make that part of your real life? Well, you have to intentionally build it in, or it won't happen, because the urgency is always on you. So, so we've tried to do that. The agenda we use in Waukee with our senior leadership team, when we meet, we dedicate an hour. The first hour is strategic priority work, and then the urgency work is the next column, and that's the rest of the meeting. Because if you've lived it, I'm sure. If you flip those two columns, you'll never get to that other column, because well, I should say never, but these are just dynamic jobs, and there's stuff going on. So I would say that's just been, and it's a little thing, but it's a big thing.
I love that. Yeah, I realized right away with having, as a superintendent, you don't usually have your director. That's the first time you have directors from food service and transportation and custodian. Like, whoa, I haven't had to think about these things before, And I think, I connected with you a couple of summers ago, and I think with that conversation, a couple other conversations, I realized how important it was to have metrics and goals for those leaders. But we have not done a good job of, when I'm doing my one-on-ones with those people, we'll look at data, but we will not share those in meetings consistently. We do not have a set plan. So I think that's something I need to come back to, just like you said. I've kind of lost focus on that. One question I was going to ask you, so you mentioned the meetings. I'm wondering, your personal day-to-day, how do you figure out this is urgent and this is the most important work I have to do, and these are just the things that come up during the day? Do you have a mindset or a trick or a way you delineate what to do?
Well, yeah. So for me, a lot of my job is managing the internal and external environment. So, and there's just more politic around that. So a lot of my thought is, what do I need to do to make sure kids get served in my role in managing politics? So whether that's supporting and managing the board so they understand. So I'm a believer in board giving direction. We go and do that work, and they give us the how. So I like when they give us the why and what they expect, and we get some how space in there. So keeping them updated and not surprised. So that's a priority for me and probably all superintendents, because I always joke, everybody says they like a surprise, but nobody really likes a surprise. Maybe on your birthday, but so, and then what are other strategic relationships, and what am I responsible? So we have the Apex program. We have 600 business partnerships through the Apex programs for our kids. So like coming in, we were deliberate about connecting me with some of our largest standing partners and their senior leaders, so that we maintain, like, this is why it's important for us. This is why it's good for both of us. So really trying to come in and understand maintaining the internal and external environment. And then I would be honest with you, when I haven't been in schools for a week or so, I'm not the best version of me. And I'm not good about it every time. Sometimes it'll get to be a couple weeks, but there's nothing more joyful than sitting in a kindergarten classroom. Like, by the way, one of the 3 toughest jobs in public school, and just watching a truly skilled kindergartner teacher do his or her thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some deliberateness around being in schools and people and listening to them, right? When I go visit a school, I'm probably not unlike most. I want to talk to teachers in the hallway and say, hey, how's it going? What can we do to better support you? What's it really like? And the more of that you do, the more they trust you to say what really is going on. Not that they're not telling you the truth. They're just being respectful and polite and professional. And,
Sure. How do you, gosh, I feel like I need to keep going here, but I want to ask you, you talked about having those conversations with staff members. How do you build that trust with them to truly tell you what they think?
Yeah.
I mean, you seem like you're a very approachable person for even being in huge districts, but how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's consistency in communication and message, authenticity. So like the first 20 minutes in the Hope event, I was very, I showed them my family. I showed them the dog. I talked about how what we were listening to and what made sense to me. And then, I don't know. I think it's just being consistently authentic and intentionally approachable and out amongst them. Because if people see you, so Joel Klein was the chancellor. So this takes me back to my department days. This is one of the things that has always resonated with me. Joel Klein said, so this guy's chancellor of a 1 million kid district, right? So I always used to laugh. I was director. His district was twice as large as the number of students I had as director.
So where's Joel Klein at? Where's he at?
So he was chancellor of New York City schools.
Oh, geez. Okay.
He's since retired. And so when I was director, we'd get together all the directors. I think it was probably 3 times a year or whatever it was. So we'd have some pretty cool people come and speak to us and, that kind of thing. So Joel Klein came one time, and one of the things he said that resonated most with me is, you can lead people, you can be authentic, you can do all that, but they have to feel your leadership. They have to feel that you're passionate and committed to this. So he said, I would bring in my middle school principals, and he said, I have like 50 of them or whatever. And he said, I would bring people intermittently, and I would just talk to them from my heart and just, yeah, we're doing all this stuff, but here's really why. And here's how this matters to our kids. And so that's just one of the things I try to get to faculty meetings. So like, even in this COVID, I've asked if I could jump on a Zoom with all staff and really just thank them and be authentic around what's happening in their lives. And, they're managing home lives, and maybe a spouse or partner that's working from home and wasn't. The kids are at their feet, and they're also doing one-to-one education. So I've just jumped on, I don't know, it's just things like that.
Yeah. Wow, you probably had some just cool, really cool experiences in that role in the Department of Ed, and seeing how other states do
Oh, yeah.
things, and just I mean, we sometimes I think we have it tough in Iowa, but then I do hear about some of the financial shortfalls of other states,
Oh,
and and I see
no,
you shaking your head there.
no, Jared, this is just off the thing, but just a funny one. So I became friends with the director of Alaska, just
Oh,
completely down to earth guy, right? And we were at a rural education conference once, so they pulled directors from the more rural states. So we're at a rural education conference. Here I out just chatting on the patio, and he had school districts where he would have to fly to the school district, and then he would have to fly to schools within the district. So if he was going to go visit that school district, it was literally 2 days of travel to visit like 4 schools in that school district. So he would smile and say, "So you think you have it rural in Iowa?" He said,
wow.
"This is Alaska rural."
That is crazy. Oh my! I mean, I've heard of
So,
like football game. Yeah, I've heard of overnight trips in Montana for football games, but
yeah,
flying to different school districts, that is wow.
yeah.
Okay, so we don't have it so bad sometimes.
No, no, it was quite the
Wow.
deal. So when I was driving my Kia between districts as director, that was a little different than the
Sure.
bush plane. Yeah.
Puts things in perspective a little bit. Do you have a daily routine? And do you have any tips or tricks or tips you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, if I could just give, this is maybe a piece of coaching advice from a guy that's been doing it a while. I, for a long time, neglected my physical health in terms of exercise, and I didn't eat any breakfast. I grabbed a sandwich on the run and then came home and ate a frozen pizza and went to bed. And that's all fine for a while. But if there was one advice I could give to people getting into this work, establish a routine in your day. So I really work hard to get up in the morning. It's been not as good with this COVID thing because it's just been a
Mhm.
different. But when I was, pre-COVID, excuse me, getting up in the morning and getting some type of exercise in, whether it's a light weights workout. And if you can find one of the things that's been important to me, I have a group of guys I play basketball with a couple of times a week, and that, of all the things in COVID, that's one of the things I've missed most, is just camaraderie, where everybody's just out there to have a nice time, get a little bit of exercise and some sweat on. So if I could just give advice around that, the sooner you start that in leadership, because it's the tyranny of the urgent. You can fill your days. I mean, if you're living leadership, you've lived all of this. Um, so to the extent that you can get pretty intentional about exercise as part of your daily routine, and paying attention to when you're eating and what you're eating, um, it seems like, okay, yeah, Brad, that's whatever. But as a guy that was doing this at 28, and it ballooned up to 230 pounds 5 years later, um,
Mhm.
yeah, you
Mhm.
have to be intentional about it. And
It's
you,
great. Yeah. You mentioned, and the one thing that you mentioned right away was the eating habits. Like I talk to so many principals, educational leaders, whatever the role is, where, oh, I don't eat lunch. I don't eat breakfast. Whatever it is. And I'm like, how do you do? I mean, I'm always consistent. I'm very health conscientious, but like, you're right. There's so many educational leaders out there that will not eat for the whole day, and they'll say they're fine, and I just find that hard to believe.
right. How might your energy be different had you walked for 30 minutes this morning and had a bowl of yogurt and some granola, right? I
Sure,
mean, yeah.
sure, yeah, yeah. Hey, what is one commonly held belief in education that you disagree with?
Oh, I've been on this one a while. The concept of dedicated time for intervention in a school day has never made sense to me. And the reason it's never
Interesting,
made sense to
interesting.
me
Yeah,
is because if you're doing your core instruction well, 80% or so of the kids should be getting it. So when you put dedicated time in the schedule for intervention, you are actually saying I'm going to support 20% of the kids and give 80% of the kids something else to do right now. And we can say, well, yeah, they're in extension activities and they're, fill in all the blanks and all the ways that people, and teachers are working hard and they're doing honest work. So this isn't in any way saying anything against teachers, because I have nothing but deep respect for teachers. We as administrators have set this mind frame up. So what I would say is, if you really have that many kids that are in need of intervention, then your core is broken. And so rather than spend time in intervention, why aren't you extending the core? So, and if you really do have a solid core, then what strategies can you do to give kids experience? So pull the kids to the kidney bean table that need the tier 2 and tier 3 supports. So I'm a big fan of the concept of tier 1, 2, and 3, and that kids need different things at different times. And that may not even be it might even be in the same content, but different concepts. I mean, I agree with all of that part of it, but this idea that we're going to set, 30, 40 minutes a day for intervention, I have never understood that and have been very resistant to it where I have worked. When I was at Cedar Rapids, I got on this little bit of a tangent at a cabinet one time about it, and they're all looking around because they have intentional intervention time, built in, and they've worked hard to get it built in, and they've done all these, and I said, well, we're not going to dismantle that. So we've got a system that, although I would invite us taking a look at over time, what is going on in intervention and what is going on in our core, and could that time be differently used to better serve our kids? So that's one. There's actually a national leader in this. I cornered him if you knew me a little, this would not be surprising. I cornered him at a conference one time after he had talked about all that. I'm just shaking my head through the whole thing. And I said, so just, anyway, walk me through.
Sure.
Anyway, it ended positively. Okay. I mean, it's, nobody's there to, grind an axe with him, but just trying to better understand. And we both left smiling. So
sure. Well, you got to have, I think anybody who's going to be successful, you got to be able to have those conversations where you're bringing your ideas to the table first about, and gosh, as you're talking there, I'm like, gosh, we're pushing for more better align, or just having a better system at our high school for next year, of setting up more time aside. But you got me thinking, what are we doing with the tier 1? Are we setting up 20% of our kids just having a mindset of not 100% of our kids are going to be successful? We're okay with 80%, and 20% you can go and get the additional help. But no, and that whole idea about, if we take that time where we're doing the intervention and add more time to the core, could that help us get to where we need to be just in that tier one instruction? So I am really glad you brought that up. That's a unique perspective that I think if I was sitting in your cabinet meeting, I would be slouching down too, because I've been pounding the table on doing some of that intervention work. So
and intervention still has value, but can you bring intervention to the classroom while kids are being exposed to the core?
Sure.
That's the coin of the realm to me. That's the one. And so
that's really
I don't envy, Jared, one of the things I would also add to that is I don't envy teachers. When people talk about teaching, when I was teaching 20 plus years ago, the level of what was expected in a classroom compared to what's expected in a classroom today, it's like not even in the same planet. So yeah, we worked hard to serve kids. Yeah, I felt like I did a great job teaching, but I wasn't focused on understanding that kids had tier 2 and 3 needs, and what could I do in that classroom to better support that child on the backside deliberately with intentionality. I mean, we were all working hard and help kids that were behind,
absolutely.
But and just the level on focus on behavior and supporting kids from a behavior perspective and understanding it's communication and not them just being a knothead. And I don't know.
Well, hey, I got one last question for you, and this is always a fascinating question for me. And the question is, what is the single coolest goosebumps moment you have had as a school leader?
Yeah. So I've had so many neat experiences with kids and teachers and principals. You know, so I was digging through this in my head. So this is maybe going to sound. So when I was at Sadell, if anybody's familiar with Sadell, 1,300 kids, probably 60 or so % free and reduced lunch. Lots of longtime families, lots of families connected to. If you're familiar with that area, it's right down by Firestone, and heavily blue collar, and we got a grant from the federal government to implement a system of instructional leaders in that district. And so we spent hours and hours with our teachers association talking through the details, modifying our teacher content, making sure everybody felt good about, because part of it was a pay for performance. So the whole grant, the reason the grant existed, the government wanted examples where pay for performance could work. We didn't want the pay for performance because we weren't even philosophically necessarily aligned to the way they wanted us to do it. We were at, if we're going to do pay for performance, let's do it by school. So everybody's working hard, and if we meet our goal, then everybody gets $500, including the custodian, the nutrition worker, the whatever, because we wanted to do it from a team mindset. They wanted an individual one and score you and all this stuff. Well, we were willing to do that part because we wanted the money to get the other part, which was adding instructional coaches. So this is before TLC.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
So this is all before TLC, but TLC was in conversation. So what we kept saying is, if we could get this grant, we could build TLC in Sadell. And if TLC ever comes into existence, we will actually have a way to fund this going forward. And it's going to make a huge difference for our kids and our teachers. So everybody looking like, oh, Brad, you're a dreamer, you know, that TLC thing. Do you think that's ever really going to happen? And I'm like, well, worst case is if it never happens, we'll at least get, I think the grant was like 4 or 5 years. We'll at least get 4 or 5 years of coaching underway. And the pay for performance part wasn't the worst thing. It was going to put $1 million into the pockets of teachers over the length of the grant. Now, the part that wasn't so cool is unevenly. So there were, so that part,
okay.
we didn't love
sure.
that part. But just working so closely with our teachers association to get everybody comfortable. And then you have to take a vote. And so you have to take a vote of your teachers if they're willing to accept the grant. So we worked with staff.
Wow.
I think we had 94% of staff at that vote who voted yes.
Wow.
And so just the whole goosebumps moment of me for that was, we get the grant, we get 94% of our teachers to say yes, we get people hired. And then, like, I don't know what it was, 6 months or a year later, TLC passes. And I have goosebumps right now, just talk like that completely changed that school district. And if you look at Sadell's scores from when we started that grant and what it has meant for kids and for teachers and so the good news is, what you'll quickly find, Jared, is when I leave, results improve. So, so over the years, the math and reading scores there have just gone up and up. And I haven't looked at it most in the last couple of years, but I was watching it just year over year over year. And I just think, man, we made a difference like that. It's amazing. It's amazing. And it wasn't me. Like, the great news is I left. And that's one of the parts I love about it is I left and it got nothing but better.
Well, I'm going to go full circle on you. You throw out Jim Collins. He would say the best organizations are the ones that keep getting better. It's for a leader who leaves, who can put something in place. And when they take off, if that company keeps getting better, that's a level 5 leader right there. Right.
It was totally, we did this thing. We did this. That's just cool. And I've had other really cool experiences like that. That one in particular was, and actually it was the springboard for my getting noticed for the director job.
Wow. Well, I bet. So that's cool. I had no idea that you guys put in like a TLC model before there was TLC. So when TLC came in, was there like double instructional coaches, or did that kind of, or what do you think was the success? Because a lot of districts struggle with TLC. Sounds great, but they don't have the system in place that leads to continuous improvement. What do you think was the magic there that you guys, the way you structured it? What was the magic? Any idea?
Yeah. So this is the bias I have. So the TAP system, one of the things we used as the framework for our implementation, you had to have a research aligned framework. So that was TAP for us. So if you go into the TAP is one of the things that's being used in the state of Iowa now. So they've got rubrics to support teaching, like Danielson and Marzano, only they've got their set of those rubrics. one of the things, we got to go visit schools that were doing it in other states, and their intentionality in PLCs, their instructional coach would actually teach the lesson in the PLC, in the strategy they wanted people to work on next, high level strategy. So they would pre-teach the high level strategy in the PLC, and then the teachers were expected to go try that, collect classroom data. So what I would say about TAP was it had a framework for describing effective teaching that you could give coaching feedback on, incredible level of intentionality, and what they called it something other than that, but it was the PLCs. Then there was also, the principal was required to meet with those leaders. They had a lead team in every building, and the superintendent or director was to go in and watch, and there was a rubric to measure the quality of that meeting. So they gave them feedback on that meeting. And then there was another layer of meeting that had a rubric design set. So that system, take the performance pay out of it. That the alignment of that system of tools to coach teachers, tools to coach a PLC, tools to coach a leadership meeting, all aligned. If you had people bought into that and they were using it, that you couldn't help but get better, honestly. Yeah, really cool system.
And I need to get this summed up, but at Cedar Rapids, you used like Marzano's High Reliable Schools, correct?
Yeah, that's.
So, I mean, that kind of sounds like the same kind of idea, right? Am I correct?
Oh yeah, High Reliability Schools is awesome. Level 1 is safe and collaborative environment. So intentional structures around, do people feel safe, and is there intentionality and collaboration? And a focus on instruction, aligned and relevant curriculum. I mean, you go right on down the line. And again, rubrics to collect feedback, or some tool to collect feedback, innovative configuration, whatever the right words are. But yeah, any of those. And that's where we're headed to in Waukee. Is we're headed to, in this strategic plan, we'll have goal work around improving instructional outcomes in SEB. And I would guess we'll need to choose a framework, because that's the part. If you have to have, I'm getting old now, but you have to have a framework that makes sense to people and gives them all kinds of room to do their thing while continually feeding back to that framework. So Marzano's really cool. If we had a whole 40-minute one for Marzano, that system's amazing.
Well, I think that's like, I mean, I've had probably 30 takeaways from this conversation, but I just remember when I reached out to you a couple of years ago, and you mentioned the framework that you were using there in Cedar Rapids. It's just something that I think leaders who really want to do a job at a high level, like, need to investigate because I get the feeling, I could be wrong, I don't know all the districts in the state. I don't feel like a ton of districts in the state focus on that work. Is my guess. I could be wrong on that, but that's my assumption.
Yeah, one of this, I see lots of really, and I saw it as director, lots of really well-intentioned work and lots of really high-quality one-off examples in schools. But the schools that were really making the difference had some type of framework they were using to guide the work going forward, that they could continually circle back to and say, this is why this matters. Yeah, 100%.
Well, when you guys figure it out, I will be very curious what Waukee does in terms of the framework that you guys use. So, hey, I got to get going here. We're about an hour in here. So, man, that was outstanding. Is there anything else that you forgot to mention that you wanted to throw in here at the end of the show? Or?
Well, I just want to remind people. So when I talk about all these things, I did like 2% of the work, and I have been ridiculously blessed in my life, and I am to this day, to be surrounded by amazing leaders who amplify this work in ways my brain could never even imagine. So just, it still is all about people and trusting your team. And I always have a desire to be the least smart guy in the room. So surround your people that are willing to question you, that are bright, articulate, passionate. Give them a framework and turn them loose. So
sure. Well, I'm sure your staff really appreciate that humble approach, and I can see why you're very well liked wherever you go. So I appreciate it. And hey, like you said, I would love sometime down the road, maybe next year, once you got some of this figured out with what direction you're going with that framework and everything else, I'd love to bring you back on. So thanks a lot. Hey, enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jared.